Hey, today I'm building a simple system in N8N that lets you scrape emails from Google Maps completely free without needing any third-party APIs. That's right, we're going to do it entirely in N8N, and what I'll do first is demo the flow before then showing you guys how to build it on your own from scratch. You guys can find the templates in the description as per usual. So this is what the flow looks like. This works using a Google Sheet. The Google Sheet is pretty simple. We just have two here, one called searches and another called emails. Both have one column. Now the search on the left-hand side here has a row called Calgary plus dentist. What this is this is a Google search URL. If you pump Calgary dentist into the URL of the search, you will get a giant list of Google Maps listings that have Calgary dentist. What we're going to do then is pump that into our flow as input. And then at the end of it, we are going to have a giant list of emails that are going to dump right over here. Don't believe me? Well, let's get started. When I click test workflow here, we're grabbing that search query that says Calgary dentist. And then what we're doing is we're scraping all of the Google Maps listings over here for Calgary dentist. So this is going to look like something like maps.google.com / Calgary dentist, let's say. Okay. After that, what we do is we do a ton of processing. We do some URL extraction. Then we do some filtering, some duplicate removal, some limiting in my case, just for test purposes. Then we have a simple loop that allows us to extract emails using code before finally dumping all of the results in our Google Sheet. Looks like we got 8 items. So if I go back over here to the Google Sheet, so you can see we've now deposited all of the email addresses over here. Okay. Info at McLeod, admin at Beddington, info at Galaxy, Seton at Galaxy, and so on and so on and so forth. And this is just a small little search. You can actually run this across tens of thousands of different Google Maps listings. All you have to do is just change the limit and then pump in a bunch more search terms on the left. Okay, so how do you actually build this from scratch? Well, let me walk you guys through what this looks like, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. And I like doing this because if I didn't, I'd just be showing you guys a finished product. That's kind of like, showing an engineer a picture of the Eiffel Tower, then saying, hey, there it is. Why don't you go ahead and build it? Right? It's not very realistic. So why don't I actually walk through how to build this thing from scratch? And as I mentioned, you can grab the template below in the description. We'll call this Google Maps Scraper No API. I'm just going to add a tag for N8N course here to keep things very simple. Okay, so first step that I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a manual trigger. The reason why I'm going to do this is because I'm not going to connect this to my Google Sheet, at least for the purposes of this demo. I'm just going to keep things super simple and super easy, and we can talk about adding a sheet input later. The next thing we're going to need is an HTTP request, okay? Now this is where we're going to be putting in the URL of our Google Maps search. Now Google Maps is scraped using a very specific URL. It is www.google.com/maps/search, and then we put in the search query. Now, you can't have spaces in the query, and that's why we needed to add that plus beforehand. There are 2 additional options I'm also going to add. The first is going to be ignore SSL issues, and the second is going to be response. We're going to include the response headers and status too. Now, when I click this test step, what's going to happen is it's actually going to perform that HTTP request to the Google Maps backend, and then we're going to receive a giant list of essentially HTML. Now, hidden within this HTML is a bunch of links that we can then take, do more HTTP requests to, and then extract email addresses directly from all of those. The question is, how do we actually get these links? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to share a little snippet of code that I've used for this purpose. It's actually very straightforward. I should say that you don't need to use code for this, but I thought it was simple enough that I just asked ChatGPT in 10 seconds, whip me up a little code snippet that does this, and it did a pretty good job. So I'm going to write code. That's going to allow us to run some custom JavaScript or Python code. I'm then just going to take all of this stuff out, and let me run you guys through what the code would look like. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to grab some of that information on the left-hand side here, and I'm just going to package it all inside of an input variable. In JavaScript, we do that by writing const input. Now, the purpose of what I'm about to show you is not that I expect you guys to learn JavaScript or kind of figure it all out just watching me write this. It's just to show you guys how easy and simple it is to grab data that is in no code format and then use a couple of lines of code to simply and quickly convert it without also requiring a ton of executions. The cool thing is you can now ask AI to do large portions of this for you. I just know that this particular snippet of code works. That's why I'm going to reuse it. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to store within input all of data. So I'm just going to go $. This is going to allow me to select the specific item that I want to pull. So we'll do input. Now in N8N, they have this convention where they actually return all data from previous nodes as an array of items. And so what we have to do is we have to select the first of this array. Even if we're only getting one item, which in our case we are, it's technically an array of items, so we have to select the first one. Kind of annoying, I know. Talk about annoying, we have another convention here, which I don't really talk about, which is this JSON convention. In order to access this data, we first have to go through this filter of JSON, and then after, finally, at the very end, now we can actually select that data, okay? So now, for all intents and purposes, this is inside of this. All right, moving on, what we have to do next is we have to build out the pattern that we're going to use to extract all of the URLs. So what I did is I actually asked ChatGPT a moment ago to build me out a regex, which is essentially a regular expression, a templating language used specifically for this purpose. Now, I know this because I use regex all the time to extract, parse, and do various things like this. If you just had a brief 5-minute conversation with ChatGPT and asked it how you would do this, it would probably return regex as an example as well. So don't think that this is some super convoluted, scary programming stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. Then I'm just going to write const regex, and then I'm going to paste this in along with a couple of additional characters. I do a slash at the beginning and a /g at the end. This just stands for global. And again, it's one of those little formatting things. From here, what we have is we have the input data, all of the scraped stuff in code. We then have the pattern that we're going to apply to this. What we have to do is we actually have to do the applying. So the way that I do this is I write const. Const is just a convention in JavaScript. URLs are, why don't we just use websites? It's probably a little bit easier for people to understand. What we're going to do is we're going to go input, and we're going to match it, and then we're going to match it to this regex, okay? Then finally, what we're going to get as a result of this is we're going to get a giant list of websites. So what I want to do next is I want to return these websites in the format that n8n is expecting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return websites, the .map, and then for all websites, I'm going to return a website. And then they have this specific format with an equal sign and then a greater than symbol, which is basically like an arrow. Then we return things nested within one layer here. I'm going to go JSON, and then I will return my website down over here. Okay. So if I didn't screw something up, if I click test step, we should have a giant list of websites under this website thing, which we do. Now, what you'll see is we got a giant list of websites, but these aren't really websites related to our search. We have schema, Google, whatever, GGP, HT. It isn't until I kind of go way farther forward, okay, that we actually start getting the dental care websites that I was looking for. Okay. This is a problem, obviously. We don't actually care about Google and gstatic and stuff. So what we have to do is we have to remove them. And that's what this next step is going to be. It's going to be filtering out all of these really annoying domains that don't really add anything, and then giving us a nice tight list of only the dental websites that are left. Because remember, what we're doing is we're basically going to like Google Maps. We're pumping in Calgary Dentist. We're just scraping the entire page, right? So we actually need to take this data and then we have to format out all of the additional links that they provide us. But never fear, that's actually very easy to do in n8n. What I'm going to do is I'll just press P. That's going to pin my output data. Then over here, I'm going to go filter. Okay, now filter allows us to remove items matching a condition. So I'm just going to drag in website over here. Now what I want to do, if you think about it, is I just want to remove all those bogus ones. So schema, I want to remove Google, I want to remove a bunch of stuff. And in filter, in order to do that, just go to string and then go does not contain. So first of all, I don't want anything to contain schema. Next up, I do not want it to contain anything with the term Google, right? I saw a couple of other terms there that I'm just going to pump in really quickly. And, we'll go back and forth until we actually get all this stuff done. I think it was GG, right? I want it to contain that. Let's test this and let's see how that works, first of all. So we fed in 302 items, and as you can see, it's only returning 133. So we're actually getting pretty far there. And it looks like we're actually getting like dental domains now in the first page, which is nice. We still have gstatic. Okay, so we got to get rid of those. What else? Gstatic search.opencare. Opencare might actually be good. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, what else we got? Gstatic mostly, but then we also have can5, recall max. Okay, I don't know what that is. Chat now. Okay, so gstatic is really the main one. Why don't I go and then we'll go, I also don't want you to return anything that contains the term gstatic. Okay, let's try this now. As you can see, we're just like progressively filtering, but this looks pretty good. Well, you'll notice those, we're getting a ton of duplicates, aren't we? Richmond Dental, Concept Dentist, Pathways, Heritage. That's not good. We need to remove these. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to press P again, pin the data, and now I'm going to go to remove duplicates. So how do you do that? Dedupe, or actually it's the remove duplicates node here. And I'm going to go remove items repeated within the current input. This is the easiest and simplest way to just immediately remove duplicates from the preceding node. If I press test step, you'll see that we fed in 60. Now we only have 27 left. Okay, very easy. Awesome. So now that I've removed the duplicates, if you think about it, what have we done up until now? What we've done is we've scraped a bunch of data over here. We then extracted it with code. Extracted URLs with code. We're then filtering these URLs. Now we're removing all the duplicates in those URLs. Well, the next thing we have to do is obviously we have to start scraping the individual pages to look for emails, right? So I could theoretically just add another HTTP request here. And what it would do, is I would feed in the URL of the website that I want. Okay. What this would do is it immediately process all 27 items in the list. But I'll be honest, I've tried this before. And if you try in n8n and just process all 27 websites, usually your IP address gets blocked. So what we have to do is we have to do like basically some scraping hygiene here. And we have to be a little bit smart about how we're going to be performing all of these scrapes. And the way that I like to do it is I like to use what's called a loop over batches or split in batches node. So just type loop. Loop looks pretty intimidating if you've never used it before, because there's all these arrows that are going in and out of different modules, and there's this replace me node, which means nothing to most people here. But let me just run you through it really simply. What this does is it will take the output of the previous node as input, and then it will run for all 27 items this loop. So it'll do everything that we say over and over and over and over again 27 times. And on the 28th run, it'll say, hey, there's nothing left back here. And then it'll say, okay, well, I guess we're done. And then it'll proceed down the done path. Okay, that's all that's really going on here. So you have to feed the output of this into the input in order for this to make sense. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the HTTP request right over here. And then what I'm also going to do, just before I map all this, is I'm also going to add a little wait node. I'm just going to make a wait of 1 second, because I've had a couple of issues in the past where I don't have any waits in my HTTP requests. And then as a result, I can like demo it or whatever, but I don't just want this to be demoable. I actually want you guys to be able to use this. In practice, if you don't have any waits, you can just get IP blocked pretty easily when you're doing any sort of scraping. So I usually recommend, at least for testing purposes, just put some waits in, okay? Then the output of this wait is going to be the input to the loop over items node, okay? And now what we've done is we've essentially closed the loop, and now we have this done little string, which we can fire off after, all right? Okay, just to make things minimally ugly, I'm just going to move this stuff down here. And now what I need to do is I just need to get the input into the loop over items node. This is kind of annoying to do. I'm just going to look at test step and see. We can't actually do this because I've connected this. Why don't we just delete this, retest this. Okay, so now we have the loop branch, which contains the website. So we can actually feed this into the website, and then we can add this loop branch in. Now that we have access to that, we can just drag the website over. A couple of additional things that I'm going to add. Under the redirects tab, I'm just going to go do not follow redirects. Some websites will redirect you multiple times. Then when you hit a redirect loop, it just makes the thing error out, which is kind of annoying. And anyway, then I'm going to have that wait, and then it's just going to go for all 27 items, okay? Pretty straightforward. Now, I'll be real. I don't want to take 30 seconds to run this every time for demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to cut the input way down. See how it says 27 items? There's a quick little hack that allows us to do this during testing and end-to-end. Just add a limit node, then add the limit something really small like 3. Because we did this, what this will do now is this will take 27 items as an input, then it's only just going to poop out 3 items. Which will mean that when we run this through our loop, it's going to do it in 3 seconds, not 27. This is just going to help me do this video a little bit faster and then just retain my sanity, while also minimizing the likelihood that we get IP block because we're running a lot of requests, okay? Work smart, not hard. Okay, now I'm going to execute this workflow. As you can see, first item done, second item done, third item done. And then once we're done, what it does is actually returns 3 items. How cool is that? So what is it returning right now? Well, it's returning all of the HTML from the websites that we just scraped. So a bunch more code. But this isn't really what we're looking for, is it? No, it's not. I'll tell you what we're looking for. What we're looking for is we're actually looking for the email addresses, okay? So how do we find the email addresses here? Well, that's where another code block is going to come in handy. What we're going to do in this code block is instead of finding URLs, we're actually going to go and we're going to parse emails. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this in over here. Then the output of this code block is going to loop back and be the input. And then once this is done, we can then get into some final data processing, and then we should be good to go. Okay, so what are we going to do with this code block? Well, I just pasted in a bunch of the stuff over here. Well, if you think about it, we're basically going to do the exact same thing that we did for the URL. It's just instead of doing the URL, we're going to do this for emails. So we're going to run a bunch of code that basically takes the data that we're feeding in from this wait, which actually we already have inside of input. And then we're going to look specifically for emails. So I have another regex here. It's just instead of this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask it to find me all emails. So let me go back here. Then I'll say, okay, great. Now build me a simple regex that finds all emails in a website scrape instead. What it's going to do is it's going to write me something very similar. And I don't actually know if this is entirely good to go. I'm going to try it. We're going to see what happens, but I usually just run it and then play it by ear. Go /G again. Then here under const websites, what I'll do is I'll go emails, okay? And instead of returning websites.map, I'll return emails.map. And then instead of website, I'll go email, and then JSON, I'll go email, okay? I don't know if this is going to entirely work. We'll give it a go, okay? We couldn't find any emails in the first 3, so I just pumped this up to 10. And it looks like we are now getting a couple of email addresses, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's to be expected. We're not going to get emails of everything, for instance, right? In the demo, I think we pumped in like 300 or something, we got like 100. So that's that. Now that we have a bunch of email addresses, what we're going to do is we're going to go and proceed down the done loop. What do we got to do with this done loop? Well, if you think about it, like we're outputting a bunch of emails, right? Everything is nested within this emails array. So we're going to have a bunch of email arrays. So what we have to do is basically, to make a long story short, is we have to split all of these out so that they're each their own object instead of being independent arrays. And then we're going to take that data and then we're going to add it to our Google Sheet. So what does this actually look like in practice? We actually have to like get the data out to this loop in order for me to access it. So I'm just going to add a wait for 1 second and just push it all the way through. So we're scraping. Okay, and then once we finish, we now have access to those 10 items. Let's just take a look at what this data looks like. So for some of these, we're not going to have access to the email because some of these will have been null, okay? So if you find yourself ever getting an error with an HTTP request node, what you can do is you can go to settings and then just go on error continue. And in reality, N8N can't scrape all web pages, so we're just sort of throwing the ones that it can't scrape away just for simplicity. But for the ones that it can, we're going to have email addresses, as we could see. So McLeod Trail Dental, Galaxy Dental, Scenic Smile, Seton, right? Now that we have all of these, what we need to do essentially is we need to aggregate all of the individual emails, and we need to remove all of the null entries. So I'm gonna go down here to filter first. We're just gonna use the filter to remove all the null entries. Let me pin this so we don't have to do that again. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna feed in emails, and I'll say, emails is an array, right? So I'm just gonna check, let me just go schema, or JSON, is it an array? Yeah, emails is an array. So I'm going to go down to array, and then I'll just say check to make sure emails exists. Okay, so this should just filter out all of these null entries. Cool, and now we have 3 items of the, what did we feed in, 10? And now that we have 3 items, as you can see, this is scraping multiple and aggregating multiple into a single array per website. So it scraped 3 instances of info at Galaxy, or 4, and then 2 of Seton at Galaxy, and then 2 of info at. What we want to do is we just want to stick all of this into one giant list, and then we want to run through and deduplicate it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add, how would I do this? Would I do split out? I think I do split out. Yeah, pretty sure. And I'm just going to go emails here. And this should basically concatenate all of these together into one. Cool. Now, once I have this, I'm going to dedupe it. And then this will now filter down all of the many into 4. Beautiful. Now, once we have 4, what can we do? Well, now we can, I don't know, add them to a Google Sheet or something. So let me go down to append row in sheet. That's what we're looking for. I'm just going to use my own credential. This one right over here. Then we'll go from list. I think this is scrape without paying for APIs right here, right? Then the sheet was emails, and we should just dump the email directly in here. Okay, and I'm going to use the minimize API call option because I've obviously had some issues with this in the past where I've just done so many demos that it's just dumped a bunch of stuff into a Google Sheet, and then I run into API rate limits and stuff, and then I can't record my video for half an hour. So I'm not going to allow that to happen to me today. I want to go back to this email list, just delete all of them, then go over here. Why don't I just pin my outputs? Then finally, I'll just run this, see how this works. Oh, perfect. Just dumped all 4. Very, very good. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's more or less how to do it. Okay. So a couple of gotchas that I think are pretty common for people, as well as a couple ways to extend the system. The first way you could extend the system is right now, all we're really doing is we're scraping the kind of like the homepage of all these websites. Realistically, the email addresses aren't just buried on the homepage, they're buried on all pages. So, over here where we extract the URLs, well, what you can do is first you extract the URL. Then you do an HTTP request to that URL. And then instead of extracting emails over here, you actually extract other URLs on the URL that you can access. Then you run a third loop, and that third loop goes through each of the URLs that you just extracted from the homepage. And then it does the exact same thing that we're checking here, aka extracting emails. So now if you think about it, we're significantly increasing the number of pages total that we're scraping from. But I just didn't do that for simplicity purposes. And I just wanted to give you guys like a little nugget that you could build out. This isn't the first time that people have built a sort of system like this. It's not like this is revolutionary or anything. And this is definitely one of the poorer scraper systems, I think, that I could have put together. But yeah, I just wanted everybody here to have a good place to start for more advanced scraping applications. Now, after you're done with this as well, what you could look into is if you run this at any sort of scale, eventually this Google Maps HTTP request module, this initial one, will run into Google Maps rate limits, where they'll think that you're scraping them, which you are, and their AI will detect on it, and then they'll just start throttling you. So you can only do maybe 1 request every hour or something. If you want to get around this, there are a couple of options. The most common is to use a proxy. Now, proxies are basically third-party services where you pass the request through before it goes to the end URL, which in our case is Google, that sanitize the request and then make the request appear legitimate by sprinkling in a bunch of additional data. There are a variety of proxies you can use for this purpose. I'm not going to recommend any specific one, but the way that the HTTP node works is if you wanted to add a proxy, you just go down to the bottom, click proxy, and then paste it in. And this is going to depend on the proxy service that they're using. They all have slightly different formats, and they're going to give you their username and the password and stuff like that. But that's how you do it. And then if you are going to search for something like that, then obviously search for like a search engine results proxy, a SERP proxy. And that's sort of the thing that you should start by Googling. SERP proxies depend on whether or not you want to do like residential, whether or not you want to do warehouse. There's a little bit more nuance there. If you guys want to learn more about how all that stuff works, check out the Appify course on proxies. It's probably the best written one on the internet today. I am affiliated with Appify, but you pay nothing to access that free resource. Hopefully you guys saw just how easy and straightforward it was to put together a real actual N8N scraper that allows you to get and extract email addresses directly from Google Maps listings without requiring any APIs or third-party services. The really cool thing about this is you could run multiple variations of what I just built for basically any service, whether it's directories, whether it's some other search engine, whether it's county real estate databases, and more. If you guys like this sort of stuff, definitely check out the full 6-hour N8N Zero to Hero course that I published just a couple of days ago. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out Maker School, my AI automation program that focuses on daily lead generation accountability if you wanted to turn your build and automation skills into maybe a profitable business. And have a lovely rest of the day. Looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers.